Well, Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man.
Doing good?
The sun is shining. The weather is quite nice for Houston.
We're not flooding anymore.
We're not flooding anymore. And sports are back on. So
Yeah, sports are back on. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. I lost $20 on a bet last night in football, but forget about that. So you've brought another friend here today. How do you guys two know each other? Just curly hair, or what's going on?
Well, Adeeb, I think we were actually introduced through your work with my mom.
That's exactly right.
And so my mom is the outgoing chair of the State Board of Education, and Adeeb is a rock star educator,
really
doing some really entrepreneurial things. And I'm excited to hear his story today.
Yeah, and I think we've shared a couple of Thanksgiving
dinners. Yes, of course.
And some food on the grill.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful. I actually met Mark through Donna, and as someone that I admire because she used to come to the classrooms, and I think she still does to truly see what's going on. So, and it was when I was a Teach for America Corps member. I was assigned to teach at Cashmere High School, and I taught physics.
So, what's Cashmere High School? How would you describe that to somebody who doesn't really?
So, I mean, honestly, Cashmere High School. Is a school filled with any kids that want to achieve and want to fulfill their human potential. Like,
so this is not a public school.
It is a public school.
Oh, it is. Okay.
However, I do refrain from labeling a school based on performance.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, and yet at the same time, I would like to give the context of why Cashmere is a school that unfortunately suffers from the burden of poverty, and the burden of just institutional structures that have allowed Cashmere to exist in that way. So what I would like to share about Cashmere is it's a school that is filled with humans with the utmost potential and want. However, the unfortunate reality is that there are so many non-academic barriers that existed, and I think. I came in from the pharmaceutical world, was intending to go into medical school, and I always say I spent since undergrad to working to grad school, basically teasing my parents by saying I do not want to go to medical school.
Yeah.
Right. So it was basically a very expensive journey for them, for me to come and say, you know what, I've signed up for Teach for America and I'm actually heading to Houston. I'm going to be a 12th grade physics teacher. And so but there's a thing in this journey, right? Which is it was my first struggle with what my parents wanted me in a way to do, not necessarily from the sense of like go become a physician, but more so as like there will be security with that. And it was the intersection between I do not want to do something because someone wanted to do that, so that then I could go on and bring children to this world that to do what I wanted to do, and essentially continue a cycle of people doing what somebody else wanted to do.
That sounds like a terrible feedback loop. No way.
So that's what brought me into Cashmere High School. And
So you have to be like Teach for America is a very picky hiring program. You have to be moving forward. You have to, really the whole aim of the program, as I understand it, is that they really want to attract the best and the brightest to do some public service in education for a period of time. And then, go back if they want to go be that doctor or whatever. And for you were going in, I'm going to be a doctor, but I'm just going to take this sidecar job for a little bit and then come back to it. Was that how it initially worked in your mind?
To be honest with you, it was my first step of taking a leap of faith. For the first time rejecting the paradigm of what is next. And saying, you know what, I don't really know where this will take me. I attended high school in Kuwait. And so I came to college very early at like 15 and a half. I was a freshman. And for the longest...
And an international student.
And it was like a very preset journey. Do this, then this, and come on, once you do this, you will arrive. And then once you arrive, you got to do this. And it was basically the perfect storm of it wasn't necessarily that I'll set it off and I'll go to medical school next. It was simply, you know what, I am fed up. And I am just simply going to do something completely out of the blue. And I applied last minute. And I came to Houston with no intentions. all with, and really, if I was to put an intention to it, it was simply, I will do and live in whatever I am doing. There was no intentions to start Pro Unitas. There was just simply the intention to be present with my students and make the best out of it. And that was it. So actually, Mark, it was a little different. It wasn't necessarily for me a stepping stone. It wasn't necessarily something that I was like, okay, that's going to be a great, whatever, and then go on to it. It was really the culmination of a rejection of what's next.
Yeah.
And it's like, for the first time, I'm just going to do something and embrace what I'm doing.
Wow. That is so I have so much to go through there. Okay.
Your face right then, by the way, was just like,
yeah,
blown away.
Like, here's the thing because I think if you have immigrant parents, I think they have decided your life before you've begun living it. And it was like that for me too. I came to the US and my parents were like, well, obviously you're going to do well in school.
Right.
And I was like, I guess. And then I didn't. And then they were like, well, obviously you're going to go to college. And I was like, okay, fine, I guess. And so I did. And then they're like, well, obviously you're now going to go get a corporate job. I was like, okay, fine. And then they're like, well, obviously you're happy. And I was like, wait, no, I'm not. Wait, hold on. And then I did the same thing. I just took that leap of faith and I was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm a comic now.
I'm a comic now. Yeah, so I take this leap of faith. So I totally get that. Okay, so now you're teaching high school. Okay, what's next?
So hindsight is 20/20, right? And just to preface, right? My parents, acted in the best faith. And
absolutely.
Right.
And there is no, piece about it. It's just that, now that I'm at a point where I was like, the hell with this myth that I'm going to arrive.
Yeah.
Or that do 1, 2, 3. And then by the time you are X, right? Like, you've made it. Yeah. I'm like, I've kind of lived that feeling a couple of times. And I was disappointed when I arrived. So I was like, you know what? Maybe the more I do it, the greater the disappointment. So I was like, that was really the rejection. I mean, medical school would have been great, right? But it kind of built on the premise that when I become a doctor, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's just was not whatever. And so now that I'm there, right? It was one of the most meaningful, I would say, like what my students have taught me is by magnitudes larger than what I have taught them. It was a very sobering experience as well. There are so much assets that my kids walked into my classroom with. Every single one of them, I kid you not, every 151 of them every single year walked in with the highest aspirations. But what I was facing was issues that were literally beyond my control. Hunger. The stories that would be shared about, students living, under homeless and coming to school to eat, it was just like unfathomable. It's like, okay, well, where is physics in this? By the time my students came to the classroom, they've already been through so much. So then the idea was like, the fundamental problem that started arising was, well, what do I do? Like, I kind of know what to do if I need, supplemental physics tutoring. Okay. How to target or how to kind of angle my lesson plan, right? To make sure that vectors and scalars are well understood.
Yeah.
How to design all of those kind of support systems within the education field. I mean, I worked for HISD, and HISD honestly had a superb curriculum department and superb resources. I mean, by no means that was the issue.
Yeah.
But it was, what do I do as a teacher when I'm faced with a lot of the non-academic barriers that are just that you can no way ignore, right? Like, and say that they're not affecting. My kid is hungry. My kid, just got evicted last night. Right. And they're worried about where they're going to be.
Yeah.
Right? And that is really what became so mind-consuming for me.
Yeah.
So you've identified this problem, which is, I am a teacher. I can help them with physics and school-related things, but there are problems in their lives that are beyond school. Right. So you've identified that the only way to get to these kids is to first help them with this underlying problem somehow. So what do you do now? Do you just go give all your money to them and buy them a house, or what do you do?
So that's exactly like became like, I mean, no, you're absolutely, that is really where it became the central question for almost 3 years of teaching, where I became obsessed with this problem. So it started with really like seeing, well, schools do have, in a way, built-in systems, counselors, social workers. Okay. So like there's a fundamental understanding that schools are just not academic houses, right?
Right. There's a support system there.
Exactly. Like we've moved away from parents educate, schools you teach. I was like, okay, well, that's a good kind of, there's funding for this.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe that we have enough counselors and social workers in schools. Like, and I think that, there's a lot of advocacy and work to be done here.
Yeah.
But it was like, I'm really honoring and seeing how much teachers are putting in. I mean, I'm a teacher. I'm here putting and it's like, okay, so it really became a journey of inquiry.
Yeah.
From community members, like asking questions, no obsessions with a solution as much as the obsession with how are we dealing with these things, right?
And we're not.
And we're not, right? And so it was like, okay, looking at how counselors are receiving referrals. Like when a student is, let's say, facing a challenge, what do you do? Like, what do I do as a teacher? So, okay, so it's like, oh, there's a form that you fill and then you put in a box. Okay, so that was pretty, and then that form is supposed to go to the counselor or just kind of message the counselor or the social worker. Another thing was, wow, like there is a lot of nonprofits. Like I call it, we have become a country that is program rich and system poor.
What does that mean?
We've got plenty of programs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nonprofits, great, wonderful nonprofits in this city, great system level programs, great people who like want to help and volunteer. It's like, okay, so how are we accessing and organizing these resources? How is a counselor keeping inventory? For example, when a counselor leaves, do all of these relationships go with them? So I started trying it out. So I convinced my principal at that time to kind of let me manage the campus connections with nonprofits and like external organizations.
Okay, just one pause. When you said my principal, for some reason, I imagined you like a kid, like telling them like how to do this. I know, but it just, in my mind, because you used the word my principal, it just made me think like, oh, this little kid.
It sounds like you had too many trips to the principal's office.
That's what I was about to say. I know, right?
A ton.
So it really started with, again, kind of my pledge in coming to Houston was don't think about what's next as much as embrace the moment that you're in. And that way, instead of embracing where I want to arrive, I started to embrace a journey with multiple stakeholders.
With where you are.
With where I am. Exactly. Like, what am I facing? What am I feeling? Like, how are other community members feeling and so on? So then I started coordinating resources. So, for example, Mark's mom would come and speak to my classroom. I mean, like that is an individual that is considered a volunteer that, which are like to talk about her journey. Other great nonprofits that deal with mental health, with post-secondary kind of training programs or whatever the case is. And I started creating a spreadsheet. And I was like, oh my God. Once it like became more than 2 organizations, it was so hard to keep track. Which kids got it? Which kids didn't? Who needs what? Now I'm having like exponential multiples, right? Like a student is in multiple services. It's like, okay, well, students are now matriculating to another grade level. It's like, and it was like, no wonder why our counselors are so overwhelmed and our social they're like, how do you even quantify the demand for the various services coming in? Like, do you go through these papers and by the time you go through all of these referrals, you've spent so much time going through those things that now, you don't even have time to really spend with the kids that actually need you and so on. So that was really the second phase in terms of the inquiry stage.
So you're a Teach for America teacher.
Yeah.
You're not going to tell the story without being prodded to, but what made you excellent? What were you able to do in the classroom with your physics students that really kind of popped to the district?
Yeah, I really attribute like a lot of the successes.
Well, you have to tell us what they were first.
Well, I mean, so on a district level assessment,
yeah.
my students outperformed, despite being labeled as the lowest performing high school in
like
the state.
Relative to other lower performing high schools?
Yes, it was the lowest. Like
Okay.
it was the longest, lowest performing high school in the state of Texas.
And then
Wow.
your kids, when they tested,
They outperformed the entire Houston Independent School District at that time in their physics assessment. And I don't want to say that there is a lot of factors that went into this, right? And I don't also want to take on the premise of like a hero teacher or whatever the case is, because I truly believe that it is a very isolated incident.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, there's a lot of value to unpack in it, in the sense of really the focus on relationships
Sure.
with students was one of the major factors.
So you have this thought.
Yeah.
Okay, can I teach these kids physics? Well, I can, but they're also dealing with all this other things.
Right.
And you're a great physics teacher. You've been able to get them to adopt the material and pass the test. And your next thought is not, let me stay in the classroom, but how do I scale this? Is that like a way to maybe frame it?
That was exactly right.
Yeah.
Like my thing about it was, how do I not build fake hope?
Yeah.
The issue is, I got my kids to pass physics. There's hope. The mayor issued a proclamation in the name of the students. Yet when a lot of my kids started going to college, a lot of them also started to make their way back because it was a bus ticket that they couldn't afford.
Yeah.
So think about the disappointment.
Gosh.
I have. So it was more than that, right? Like it was a lot of community. It wasn't just Adeeb. The whole school came together to really achieve these physics scores. And I would also say there was a big stroke of luck, like in this. Like, however, it was like, how do I galvanize on this opportunity to really paint a bigger picture that our system is currently built on luck, on not foundational, like access to opportunity in a way. Like it was like, literally it was a bus ticket, a wall. Like, I mean, Mark, think of your kids, right?
Yeah.
Like literally, what would probably hold them through college is they know they can call you and Lauren anytime and say, you know what, Dad, I flunked. Like, and you're like, no, I got you. It's like, or like, what resources should we? It's like that safety net.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, how do we continue this? Like, I didn't want my kids to be disappointed, right, in what would be faced. And then what was I seeing happening as a result? Great physics scores, great resumes, so on. And then 90% are back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want that to be there, that the one time that they achieved some academic success.
Exactly.
You want it to be, this is now a lifestyle of that you can sustain because you have the resources or whatever.
Yeah. So to me, it was like, well, how do you then, honestly, it became where teaching physics is not hard, but really building the social safety net.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you advocate? How do you access services? Became fundamental in terms of how do you actually like continue? Because I mean, as you are off to college, post-secondary or whatever the case is, there will still be obstacles.
Yeah.
But at least there was a way from high school, elementary school, or primary school to be able to know how to access resources.
So you started an organization.
Yeah.
What's it called?
So the organization is called Pro Unitas.
Wait, hold on. You said we are program rich and system poor.
Right.
Are you now one of these programs that are going to be system poor? Like, what's going on?
No.
Are you part of the problem? You better not be.
Yeah, so we started a system organization.
Oh, okay. That's different. Okay.
I love the programs, but I mean, and so yes, Pro Unitas started, and we developed a software.
Is there a website that I can go to visit this?
Yeah, prounitas.org. And really we have a comprehensive offering to school districts. And we offer them the technology, Purple Sense. And it's called Purple Sense because I love Prince and Purple Rain.
Yes.
And so that was really it. There's no other reason. And then there's a sense to the purple, so the purple mattress company doesn't sue us.
Yeah.
So it was first called Purple, and then it was there's a purple mattress company. I was like, okay, Purple Sense because it makes sense. And so Purple Sense, and then we offer the comprehensive support and training for school districts to become to build their necessary technology infrastructure to more rapidly identify students for support and rapidly connect them to a lot of the wraparound resources and so on. So that was, I mean, if you think about the journey of inquiry of like, how do you identify, how do you connect and so on, that is really what our organization kind of specializes in, really empowering counselors and social workers and so on.
So let me, just as an analogy, let's just throw this out there. So Teach for America is like throwing frontline soldiers on the battlefield and saying, hey, go fight the war. And some of them are doing very well. But you are more like supplying everyone better weapons to fight this war. Yeah. You're like the arms dealer. Yeah. You're the arms dealer for schools. This analogy got bad, but you get the idea.
Well, the fundamental part is like you've got a system for kind of the educational pieces. Right. When it comes to student support, the approach has always, has been very program specific. But where we came in is to really help build the infrastructure necessary so that student support departments can really kind of like less function on paperwork and kind of like the data analysis piece.
That missing box.
Exactly, that's right. So take, for example, this. Right now, there's 288 schools in the city of Houston using Purple Sense. A primary example of how Purple Sense works, right? Teacher is teaching. She realizes that a student is facing X non-academic need. Literally, the teacher is trained, goes onto her phone, his phone, computer. It's a web link. The student can actually also submit if they're, and I'll talk more about the COVID situation right now. And it's like, I am facing rental assistance. That electronic ticket is then generated, right? And then it's assigned to somebody on a campus, right? So there's no longer a paper. And we would have worked in the back end. It's like, who was it going to anyways in the beginning? It's like, right? Like we don't want people to do more. We want them to do kind of like more with what they have. Yeah. And so then that ticket then kind of goes to the counselor and social worker. So they're able to see in a very systemic way all of the tickets that are coming in. And they're able to see, okay, I've got X amount of tickets for mental health, X amount of tickets for hunger, X amount of tickets for, let's say, more tutoring or academic enrichment. Then they're able to either close that ticket by addressing the issue, or they can assign it to a nonprofit or an internal service of the districts, right? So then the district districts have psychologists, nurses, and whatever the case. So then, this referral is then sent and then they receive it, they accept it, or it's declined. So then there's now the first time that districts are able to know, what is my demand?
Wow.
Right? Like how and what's my supply? Right? And then we work with them on the supply chain. Right? So with COVID, right, what ended up happening was all of the rental assistance, to give you an example, there was the districts that we were working in went in with a very systemic, because everybody was asking, well, what do you need? Like foundations, donors, their internal teams. Well, where do we invest? So now for the first time, there's a very systemic way to say like, okay, well, we in this neighborhood or in this region, we need more services of whatever. Or you could go to a foundation and say, we have 60 mental health tickets unfulfilled. We need you to invest in more of the mental health nonprofits.
So this is so important because you're also addressing, as a way of optimizing those resources to where they're really needed most. You're also addressing the fundamental problem of, if I were to give money to organization X, Y, or Z, where is that money going? How is it being allocated? How do they make those decisions? So you're solving both sides of this problem with a system that enables it to be efficient. So you've rolled it out. I assume you started with Cashmere, maybe as school number 1, and now you're at 266. Like, put on your software company hat, how did that rollout look? What did you discover in that process? How does it connect to, the overall goals? Those kinds of questions.
No, I mean, it has definitely been, a journey of ups and downs. I think that the messaging and how you bring people along was probably one of the biggest learning lessons. kind of out of the classroom with Cashmere. I'm like, we have to like just destroy this whole system and rebuild it and whatever. And I was like, you know what? Calm down. Like, it's just like there is so much good work happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I really honor a lot of the service providers. And like to your point, Mark, like when you said optimizing, I think that nonprofits are really doing the best that they can. And I really think, I mean, the dollars spent are very well spent. But if we can even make it go further and more, and like, I mean, why not? I mean, so one of the journey is like, as we were pivoting, right? When we first started, we started by, thinking about like what this would look like. We built it in spreadsheets first and whatever the case is. But the pivot and the change that we were kind of going through, I guess part of the challenge was we couldn't keep up with communicating our change. Right. So some people like still like think that we're what we were when we were in the Cashmere feeder, right? Like versus now where, Purple Sense and evolved and what we were thinking, like our work with service providers at the beginning and like where we intend for that to be and go. So I think that is a big challenge for companies, right? Like is you're almost encouraged to continue to pivot, right? And really learn from your clients and students and your stakeholders. But at the same time, there's like a penalization, right? Because it's like, well, I thought you were doing this. Now you're doing that. Like,
oh, so, like kind of the flip-flop thing that we get in politics?
Exactly. Okay. It's like, well, I thought you were focused. It's like, well, yes, you learn, you evolve. And like, you really cannot blame me for what I was 10 seconds ago. That's the beauty and the freedom of living in the moment, right? It's like, well, I'm this now, so it's like, okay.
Okay, so you're in 266 schools. What's next?
I don't know.
The world. No, I'm just
I don't know. So from the 288 schools, we do have a 3-year strategic plan where we want to be in about 500 schools. Very focused on Houston. I'll tell you this. If we are able to change this in Houston, the 4th largest city in the country.
And the most diverse.
City.
And the best.
I'm good heading to the crematory, you know? Like, I mean, it's like, that's a dent. Like, sometimes I'm not excited by growth as much as I'm excited by kind of like finding what I call our flywheel. The name, I mean, I'm blanking on who kind of came up with, I think Jim Collins.
Good to great, yeah.
Good to great, right? Mm-hmm. And it is not necessarily knowing, but finding. I'm obsessed with finding. Kind of like when you kind of like have companies that are like, what do you want to be? And they're like, well, let's come up with our value. I don't think you can come up with your values or where you want. I think you can find. And that's the journey that I like, as I think about like this whole thing. It was a journey of finding. And yes, in hindsight, I can say it. I was here, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But it was a lot of finding, right? And when you're and so when you ask me what's next, I want to focus on the flywheel piece for a reason. Is when we really find our flywheel, and the idea of a flywheel is like, you're pushing this really heavy marble rock, whatever that is, suspended on water, so you can like actually move it. And you're like, you're pushing, and then suddenly it starts moving, right? And then you kind of tap it a little bit, and it moves faster, right? And it's like, and so you're not working as hard to kind of expand, and so that's what I'm really focused on, right?
Sure.
Like, yes, we want to be in 500 schools. Yes, we want to, But what I'm more focused on is kind of refining and continuing to find elements of our flywheel, so that then all we have to do is tap a little bit more and impact more kids.
Right. Yeah. So it's like creating a self-sustaining system that you only need to make small improvements on over time.
That's exactly
right. Wow.
Or maybe, and what I heard, and a little bit different, but when you build a good product, the product can really help the growth, right? Yeah. So if you focus on that fundamental problem, then leaping from one school district to another school district isn't as difficult, or one school to another school in a neighboring. Right. How many schools are there in Houston?
About 1,000 schools.
So you're 25% of the way into your market share, if you're going to use some of those types of terms, and you're hoping obviously that this solution can spread out. What do you say to the person that's maybe listening that might be at one of those schools saying, oh man, that sounds really neat? How do they reach out to you?
So they can definitely reach out through, to us through the website.
Yeah.
Or, we've got to kind of demonstrate the work.
Yeah.
We're happy to meet with them. But I want to go back, Mark, to, also what's next. What I do want to see, though, what I hope to see in the system is the following. Number one, a continuity of care, right? So that when a student, hopefully with this system, as a student goes from one grade to the next, kind of you don't lose the nonprofits that they were working with. The next counselor working is able to not start from scratch. So I want to see that. There's that social digital safety net. And then the second that I want to see is a fundamental right to resources. Right now, I don't care whether a student attends or doesn't attend. Let me reframe that. I'm less concerned about, yes, I do want students to do well academically. I want them to attend school. But I don't want those to be the metrics of why resources should continue to be available or not.
Yeah, referring to the head counts that these schools are getting.
Yes,
basically
it's we built a clinic on this school, but our grades are not going up. So, this clinic didn't work.
Yeah.
These two have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
A kid receiving healthcare, whether their attendance is improving or not,
is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It does not deny them the right to be able to access our resources when they needed it, right?
Yeah.
So that is also one thing I want to push. Sometimes I refrain from using the story of my physics teaching, and because I don't want that to be correlative.
Yeah.
What I want is, we want to see a system where resources are available in a very systemic way, can be accessed in a very efficient way, regardless of whether academics or attendance is changing. Because those are indicative of much larger, deeper root case issues that schools are unfortunately having to bear the burden of.
Yeah.
Right? And so while schools are a great place, and I think they are wonderful service sites, not necessarily service providers of everything because you can leverage, but they're wonderful service sites. There's a great locus here where kids are coming, and hopefully after COVID, we can return to that. And I think with COVID, we have seen how much schools are an essential part of a human life.
Yeah. So HISD is in this weird, kind of netherworld, from what I understand, where kids are mostly online and there's some tug of war with the state. How has your system, have you seen your relationships kind of change from what they would have been a year ago?
Yeah. We maintain a very positive relationship with HISD. I think as the state largest school district, they're not facing any other, not any different problems than many of the large districts, right? This has definitely added the pressure of what our kids have already been going through and now what they are further going through. But our relationship is very strong. Especially as they have invested so much money in a wraparound resource department where they actually hired, one person per campus and sometimes two dedicated to non-academic needs, right?
Wow.
So their investment is in the right place. They are definitely doing groundbreaking and innovative work. Now, I can't. All I can speak of is they have been extremely receptive, very open, very innovative as it comes to the with our partnership, and I think they're onto something.
Wow. So you've told us a little bit about where you see yourself in a few years, which, by the way, you don't make plans, you live today.
Right.
And you have some goals that you want for the educational system as a whole. And you've told us a little bit about how you went to school and were following this path and then decided to take a complete 180, do something completely different, go to Teach for America. Was there ever a time when you were younger where maybe this was apparent, this kid was going to do something different, and you knew, but not everyone else knew? Was there a weird story that occurred?
I don't know about a weird story as much as just a rebellious middle child.
Ooh,
right?
You're a middle child? High five. Yeah.
And for some reason, a person that always just had an issue with institutionalized things. Just why are we doing this?
Did you?
I think that's another one in our count of rebelliousness.
Yeah. It's gotta have that rebellious spirit.
I don't recall a specific story, just as much as kind of like very obsessed with the word why, which I'm sure many people are, many middle kids are. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's funny. But you did kind of live out and tell us the story of kind of your relationship with medical school and your parents and that supportive thing. If somebody's driving in the car, they want to bounce an idea off of you, they want to reach out to you, where do they find you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm more than, my email, it's Barqawi at prounitas.org, and maybe you guys can share it as well.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take a meeting with anyone who reaches out. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for coming on. We've learned so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being on the right side of like the fight. Like, cause when I was in school, man, it was like day and night. If you looked at the AP classes and the non-AP classes, and it wasn't because one side was more intelligent or anything like that. It was really just a matter of labeling and, in some situations, a lack of resources. And that was the only gap. And those are not real gaps.
Right. And I really appreciate you saying this. And I think we have the responsibility to change the narrative. That's why, like, I am just simply against anything that says high achieving, low income. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Like, every kid wants to be loved, seen, or when you say good or bad school. Now, I get it. You want statistics and like things to kind of like help gauge progress. But I think it's in the way that, like adding emotions to it, in the sense of like, I don't know what you mean by a good or bad school. Like what does that mean? Like at the same, we want, and also changing the narrative of like our kids, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like these kids or those kids. No, they're our kids.
Yeah.
And the fundamental issue of like what resources must exist. And some people tell me, well, Adeeb, isn't this the parents' problems?
Yeah.
Why do schools have to deal with this? I'm like, listen, I've got kids here. Like we have a responsibility towards our children.
Yeah.
Parents, not parents. I am not here to argue with you. What is your moral code of what a family or what? All I know is I have kids in front of me right now. And I know that they are our future. I mean, when you think about Houston and Steven Kleinberg's research, there's a great opportunity here. In 2050, the U.S. is going to look like what Houston is. And right now, 75% of those under the age of 26, I believe, and don't quote me on this, are African-American and Latino. And I think less than 10 or 7% have post-secondary, like they're an unempowered majority in a way when it comes to and it's like, this is a big problem.
Yeah.
And we cannot think about this issue as a one solution, one solve. Well, if families, it's like, disconnect yourself from this and see the humanity in this. It's like, if we truly come from the perspective that our children want to learn, want to do, and then like look at, well, what social safety nets need to be explicit here? Because my social safety net was very implicit.
Yeah.
I came back home. I never had to worry about food, never had to worry about where to stay.
Yeah.
And in a way, for the longest, I thought that I did it on my own. Yeah. Not realizing that I did nothing on my own. Yeah. There were so many. I was really standing on the shoulders of many people.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it's I just want to keep going and going and going and digging into this. As we think about your experience, your message really to people that are listening to this, what do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to walk away with, like, number one, don't think of our students not achieving because of just simply lack of motivation. Yeah. Or that they're that there is a bigger systemic issue here that is happening as it relates to what students are facing on a daily basis. Yeah. Number two, if you go to a gala and, and you see a student saying their story, how X program, saved X. Yeah. Don't think that this is what's happening everywhere. Right. Like, it is great that this has happened to a student or a family.
But most are struggling.
Right? Yeah. And by no means is this one student or two or whatever the case is a reflection of what's actually happening. Almost like, how the S&P 500 is doing and unemployment, like totally not reflective of, of like what's happening here, right? Like, so those things are, third is, what do we want to see for this country? Yeah. Right? Like, and how could we rally around children and kids, and stop rallying about what we think might be the ultimate solution or silver bullet.
Yeah.
Right. Like removing this thing about, if X is done, then Y is accomplished.
Right.
And really thinking about how do we actually build a social safety net for everyone to thrive.
Yeah.
Right. And not really base our decisions, on just one's own experience.
Yeah.
And lastly, let's stop saying that I made it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's just kind of walk away from this concept.
Yeah.
That I am simply a product of my own.
Yeah.
And maybe take a step back and reflect about how much happened
right
for you to be where you are. Not trying to preach here, but it's just, that is really what drives me.
Yeah.
And I think just like walking away with those certain things kind of helps frame.
Yeah.
It really changes the lens in which how you look at what's happening.
Yeah. Well, Adeeb, thank you so much for coming on the podcast with us. Guys, if you're out there listening, we'd love to hear your feedback. Reach out to us at either Mark or Harris at riskprofile.us. Share, subscribe to the podcast. And if you know of anybody that needs to talk with us or need a story that needs to get out, please reach out and look forward to hearing from you guys. All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Go be someone.
Please be someone. Yeah. Take care. Thank you.